we have people on. Thank you so much, guys, for joining today's live demo. Again, my name is Jessie, and we have the very talented Sophia, who will be demonstrating gouache landscapes. And I'm pretty excited about this. But before we dive into the painting, I just have a few announcements that I'm going to drop into the chat to serve as your guide. One would be the survey form here at Etcher. We love hearing your thoughts, your comment. We read every one of them, and we mean that. So I'm just going to drop in that link into the chat and let us know your thoughts about this live demo. Also, if you are painting along with someone, if you want to paint along, do create a screenshot, put it on your socials, and tag Etcher Studio. We would love to see them. Sophia would love to see them if you're going to paint along.
Yes,
definitely. Hey, Lynn. Hey, Alan. Hey, Naomi. Thank you guys for joining. We have people from Brazil and Canada. Awesome, guys. Amazing what technology can do. And we want this to be as interactive as possible. So if you have any questions at all about what Sophia will be doing for today's session, do type in questions, all caps, into the chat and type in your questions, and I will go through each of them. If they are somehow related to what Sophia is doing, I will relay the questions. If there aren't, then I will pull them in and then we'll ask them to Sophia at the latter part of the session. And I think that's about it. So I will also drop in Sophia's Instagram handle. Tag her if you have friends who would like to join the session as well to paint with you or watch the demo. I'm going to drop in the link as well into the chat so that you can share it with them. And we can have more people watching the demo and learning from Sophia as well. Hey, Andrea. Okay, I think we are all set, Sophia. So,
great,
guys, I'm sure you are too. So I'm gonna give the floor to Sophia and you can take it away.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to start by showing some of my works that I've done so far, so you can see kind of the style of the kind of landscapes that I do. So quite saturated postcard style landscapes. I really enjoy doing these just really bright colors and using gouache to layer up. So we're going to be doing a very similar kind of postcard style gouache painting today. And so I add this page here. As you can see, I like using tape to kind of mark off and give that really clean look. I think it looks really good like that. So I'm going to start, and you can probably see the reference photo that I'm using. So I always start my paintings with making some markings of all the layers. It's not super detailed, so I'll show you now what I do. Just very kind of rough delineation of kind of what I'm going to be painting. And what I love about doing landscapes is that you really don't have to do a really detailed drawing. It's very simple. I'm just marking off where all my layers are going to be. And there's one here as well. And then there's some plants here down here. So that's it for the sketch, which is great. You don't have to spend time doing much of the sketch. And how I work is really going from the back of the painting to the front. So the furthest thing away to the foreground. So we're going to start off with doing the sky. And hopefully you can see me mixing some paints here. And I really do start off with a very watery base for the sky. Sorry, for all of it. For all the first layer, I start with a very watery base, because with gouache, you can layer the paint really well if the base layer is quite thin, so it dries quickly. So I'm just mixing up that color. And color mixing is very trial and error for me. So I actually, I spent some time just trying to get the perfect color here. And I think this is looking good. A little bit lighter down here. So as you can see, it's very watery. Hopefully you can see that on the camera.
Let me know, guys, if you can see Sophia's screen. I think some people are having issues seeing them. Okay, thanks, Tia.
I'm really just covering all the sky with this thin layer of blue paint. And then while the sky is wet, I really like to, I'll grab another brush that's a little cleaner. And I'm actually going to put in the clouds. And I like doing this while it's wet so that it kind of starts blending in and kind of creating a very cloudish effect, kind of fluffy and textured.
Mm-hmm. Is that a mix of ultramarine and white?
It is a mix of, I think it's Prussian.
Prussian.
And white, yes.
Thank you.
And then the cloud is just pure white. I'm just putting it down. And it's blending in, so it's getting bluish, but that's good because we want it to have that kind of fluffy effect.
Okay.
So really, I'm just kind of following what this reference photo is, but not too perfectly. I just want to create that effect of these clouds. And so I'll come back to those, but for now I'm going to let that dry and I'm going to move on to the next layer. So I go down to the following layer, which is these mountains. And I'm actually going to mix and make this blue that I use for the sky a bit darker. And really, the further away you go in a kind of landscape in these photos, the more blue toned, the cooler it looks, and the more kind of faded and blue things look, because the color kind of starts dropping out. So because we're trying to create a really kind of, we don't want a flat landscape, we want to create that depth, right? So it's like crucial to really mix in and make it more blue toned the further away it looks. So I'm gonna test that. Yeah, I think I like that color for the mountains. And I'm, again, with quite a thin layer, I'm gonna cover the whole area in the same color.
We have a question here from Lynn. I think I may have know the answer, but just to confirm, you started on a dry paper, right, Sophia?
Oh, I think it froze there a little bit, Jessie, sorry.
Sorry, I'm not sure if you heard. Sorry, we have a question here from Lynn. She said you started with on dry paper, right?
Yes, I start everything on dry paper. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course. So I'm just layering this in here.
I also dropped in the reference photo, you guys, in case you missed it on the description, just so you know you have a reference of what Sophia is painting.
So I finished the background there and I'm going to come back and I'm going to add detail, but for now I'm letting that dry. So I'm moving on to the next layer, which is a much darker but still blue toned mountain over here. But now I'm starting to see a bit of the green come through. So it's because it's a little bit closer, there's a little bit more tones of green, but it's still got that blue tone. So I'm actually mixing some sap green and then this green, this blue here, which I believe is Prussian blue, but correct me if I'm wrong. Okay.
So mixing blue with sap green. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm gonna make it watery, and I'm just gonna put that in. And you can see little treetops. So just to create that effect, I'm just stippling the brush so the end of it creates that effect of treetops. Okay.
If you guys are enjoying this session, Sophia will be having her mini workshop on September 11. And if you guys are interested, you can sign up to that. She will be teaching how to add depth and hue to your gouache landscape. So there will be a lot of things that she will be teaching, like color mixes. So if you are interested to join, I'm going to drop in the link into the chat box and go ahead and sign up.
And I'll show you what I will do in that mini workshop a little later on. So right now I've finished that layer. I'm going to come back and add more detail to it. I literally just lay down the color, and now I'm moving on to the next one. So I'm moving quite quickly through these layers because I'm just laying down a very basic monocolor, basically just one color for everything, and then we'll go back in and add all the detail. So now in this layer, the blue has dropped out, so there's not as much blue tone, and I've mixed some black with green to create the base of this like foresty area here. So I'm gonna cover this whole layer in this darker color. And I'm probably using a brush that's too small. You could use a bigger brush for these layers. I'll switch it up in a second. But yeah, just any round brush like this to spread the thin paint is good.
Thanks for sharing that. I was about to ask what type of brush and number you're using.
Yeah, I really like the Etcher gouache brushes actually, and I use that a lot. Those a lot too. I have some here that I'll pick up in a second.
Okay, awesome. Thanks.
So there I've covered this area in a thin layer of that kind of dark green. And I'm gonna, like the others, come back to that in a second, but I'm moving on to the next layer. And I'm picking up a cleaner brush now, so to avoid kind of contamination of the colors, because I'm gonna do this sand color, which is some of this kind of old yellow. Let me see if I can mix it here so you can see kind of this burnt yellow, and then just some white and water. And this sand is really bright, so I'm actually going to mix a tiny dot of yellow, of just primary yellow in it as well. And I'm going to lay that down.
What kind of yellow is that, Sophia? You know, the color.
So this, here, let me show you the palette. It's a little bit of this yellow, which the name evades me right now. I can't remember what it is called. But I think, earth yellow, that's it. It's earth yellow with some white.
Okay.
And I'm just laying that down like this. And at this stage, you can actually be a little messy. Like, it doesn't have to be perfect. I think it's about getting that color down, and the details will come afterwards. Because then this dries quite quickly because it's quite thin. So now we're moving on to the water, and water is a little bit harder to do. Well, I find it quite hard actually to do water. So I've tried to practice a lot, but basically we're creating this kind of ombre effect, right? It's the three colors blended in. So you've got the darker green, which I actually already have mixed here because I used it. Then I'm going to go into a bit more of a lighter blue. So I'm actually going to pre-mix all the colors that I'm using for the water, so that when I begin to do this kind of ombre effect, I have them all on my palette and ready, and I don't have to waste time like mixing them, so I can blend them easier. So that's a good trick. Have all your colors like pre-mixed when you're doing this kind of gradient effect. So I'm mixing, to do this kind of bluey green, I'm mixing some sap green and then just some of this primary blue color. And I'm making this bluey green. And then the last color is going to be more of this sand color that we already have, but I'm going to mute it a little bit. So I'm going to add a bit more white and a tiny touch of black just to make it a bit grayer, because this sand that's coming towards us, or these little pebbles, are a bit more of this color. So now I have my three colors of the kind of gradient that we're going to create. I'm going to lay them down, starting with the darkest color first. Just a bit more water.
We do have someone from the chat who said, it's from Natalie. She said, "Hey, Sophia, so nice to see you doing something you're so passionate about."
Oh, thank you so much.
Natalie.
That's so kind. Thank you. Thank you. It's always nice to have such nice comments. I appreciate them so much.
And I see Camilla in the chat as well, watching live. She's also one of the artists who did a live with us yesterday. And thanks for joining. And here at Etcher, we do this almost every day. We have one upcoming live demo happening on Thursday, August 5th, with Maria Mishkareva. She will be doing watercolor in different shades for still life. So if you haven't done so, you can subscribe to our channel, turn on the notification bell so that you are up to date and you can be alerted when we go live. So you can watch amazing live demos like the one that Sophia is doing right now.
So I'm just blending in, because it's all still very watery and I had my colors pre-mixed. I'm able to go in with a wet brush and kind of blend them so that the line becomes less harsh. And then the last color I need to lay down is this sand color. So if you're looking at the reference photo, you can see that there's on top, there's like a white mirage-y effect of like the water, the reflections. So I'm not actually doing that right now. Right now I'm layering down the color that you see poking in from underneath it. And then I'm going to layer over kind of the reflections and stuff like that. To blend this, I'm going to get a clean brush, wet it a tiny bit, and begin to just like go back and forth on it, so it looks a bit cleaner and it doesn't have that kind of bleeding effect. And it's okay if it does, doesn't matter. So as you can see here, we've created this kind of ombre effect.
I can see that.
Okay. Now we've covered the whole page, and this is what I call like the ugly stage of the painting, because it's just, you know, the base of everything, and we have to go back from the top, and we're now going to add what I think is the fun stuff, which is all the detail. So I'm going to go back from the top, and I'm going to start with those clouds, and I'm actually going to now make my paint not so watery now. Okay, now it's the time to make it a little bit more buttery, because you're going to layer on top of the paint you've already done, and you don't want to disturb the paint from underneath. So if you make it a bit thicker, it won't do that. So now I'm going to go in, and where these clouds, I can see like the kind of brighter parts of the cloud. I'm going to go in and start to add the brightness.
It's funny you said this is the ugly face, but for me, it's really beautiful, even just the first layer.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I sometimes when it's at this stage, I'm like, oh God, where am I going with this? Like where, but when you start adding the kind of detail, I think that's like it starts coming together. But it's nice to have some color kind of laid down.
Yeah. So this is just you're dabbing in white.
Yeah, I'm literally just dabbing in white. And we could be here for like ever to dab this in, because there's so much that can be done with adding kind of these colors and detail. So and I can sometimes spend a long time doing this. But we can always come back and revisit this later on. So I'm going to leave it there. I like kind of how it's looking, but later, if we have time, we can go back in and kind of keep adding some you know, color and some shadows in those clouds as well to make them pop. So that's that done. I'm going to move on to the mountains in the back. So this is the part where I'm starting to add shape to these mountains, make them look a bit more 3D. So I need to create, from that color that we created the base of those mountains, we're now going to add in and make a darker color for the shadows. So I'm just adding in more of this really dark blue and a touch of black, very, very small, because I don't want to muddy it, but I want to kind of cool it off and create it a bit more gray scale. And again, now this is a little thicker, it's not so watery. So let me just, yes, so this is the color I want. So I'm really now going to be guided by this reference photo to tell me where these shadows are. And I like to kind of squint at the photo to show me exactly where the shadows are. Because it's about laying them down in the accurate place, but not necessarily perfectly. As you can see, I'm really just like dabbing my brush around, and it's a little bit dry, so it's creating texture for me. Because we want that like rocky texture. So with the brush is actually getting quite dry, and I like when it does that, because it helps with that texture building.
Again, guys, if you have questions, just type in questions, all caps, and then type in your questions, and we'll have Sophia answer them for you.
So just by placing the shadow down, I've created kind of more of this 3D effect with these mountains. And now I'm going to go in and create the lighter blue, where I'm actually going to place that where the sun or the light is hitting. And again, the same technique, a kind of buttery consistency of the gouache. And then I'm going to go in and start thinly dabbing on like this, really just these movements that are random and creating this rocky effect.
Yeah, we do have an interesting question from Nagomi. What brand of gouache are you using, Sophia?
Yeah, That's a great question. I use a combination of brands. I really like the Winsor & Newton designer gouache, this one here. But I also really love the Mia Arts or Himi gouache, which comes in the in a box, which is like this. So I actually use a combination and of them. And I started off with that box because it was relatively cheaper, the cheaper gouache, and it's good for kind of students to learn how to use.
Thank you, Sophia. Alan mentioned in the chat that this is fascinating to see. It's fascinating to see gouache develop so different from conventional watercolor. I think I mentioned that as well when Sophia and I were discussing offline.
Yeah. Yeah, watercolor I find watercolor very hard actually. So I'm very impressed by people that use watercolor. I love the ability of being able to layer gouache and just how forgiving it can be as well, because you can make mistakes and kind of rework them. And so I do love that. I'm just going in here with some white and picking out some highlights of, I don't know if it's snow or maybe where the sunlight is really hitting, so that it's really making those mountains kind of pop out.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I'm moving on to the following layer, which is this little area here. There's not much I need to do with that because it's very thick, dense kind of forest, but I am going to mix a little bit of a lighter green to pick out some of the highlights of some of the treetops that I can see. And I'm using like the very tip of the brush to like just go in and dab where I'm seeing more of the highlighted treetops. And just a little bit more of the darker area too. Okay, I'm going to leave that there. I'm going to move on to the next layer. Now this is a dense forest. Again, we said that this one was less blue toned, so now we're starting to see a lot more of the greens come through. So I'm actually going to mix in, I'm going to make a really dark green and a bit of a lighter green, and I'm going to alternate between them. For the dark green, I'm going to be using, I'm actually mixing black with some of the sap green. And then for the lighter green, I'm the same, but the ratio is different. There's more green in it. And I'm going to go in and I'm starting to create these little treetops with the point of my brush like this. And I'm bringing in some of the darker and I'm just stippling that around.
Are you guys painting along or watching? If you have questions, just type them into the chat. And if you post any of your selfies or screenshots of the demo, do tag us or use the hashtag @yourstudio. You can also tag Sophia. I'm going to drop in her Instagram handle as well into the chat.
Yes, I would love to see that. Okay, so I've stippled away. I don't know if you can pick that up on camera because it's very dark. So there are some like lighter parts with green and then darker parts because there's a lot of tree density here. And there's I'm going in with an even lighter green just to pick out some of the highlights of those treetops as well. And that creates like that dense effect.
Okay, a good question, Sophia.
Yeah.
Do you prefer to mix your blacks or black straight from the tube?
I'm using black straight from the tube actually, and I don't know if that's like cheating, because I know artists can mix the blacks as well, like together, and make color. But because I actually just started with gouache this year, that this is the medium that I began this year, I haven't explored color mixing as much as I would like, but that's definitely a goal of mine. So yeah.
Thanks, Sophia. Okay, so straight from the tube.
Yeah,
okay.
Straight from the tube. Okay, so now I'm mixing a very light green, because I'm gonna start marking in where the treetops are of the trees that are more in the foreground, or more closer to us. And I'm just gonna do just mark those where they are, so I can get that rough shape of them. And then there's some trees really kind of here on the coastline here.
Okay. So we have a question from Sandra. Where is the source of the light in the painting?
That's a really good question. Well, the source of the light to me is coming from, it's kind of diffused everywhere, but in the sense that it's been picked up by many different things. So in this particular photo, it's very hard to say it's directly coming from one strong area, but I believe it's coming kind of from this area here onto kind of down, if you can see my hand movement, like this, because the highlights are very strong on this side, so it seems like it's picking up from here, and then you can see in the mountain as well, in the background, and now you'll see in the trees. So I've just marked where the trees are going to go, but now I have to create that effect of them, so I need to put in the contrasting really dark color down so that you can see where exactly kind of those highlights are being picked up.
Okay. Thank you, Sophia.
Yeah, no problem. It's a little tree here. So now I'm just creating the shapes of the trees.
It's amazing that you're doing dabbing motion pretty much all throughout, and yet you can really see the texture and highlights and the different elements within the painting.
Yeah, I really like creating textures with like the brushes. I think that can really help, especially like leafy and kind of mountainous and rocky, and getting all those kind of textures in. So as you can see, I've laid down like the darker areas of these trees, but they're nowhere near finished, because I like to really pick out like a lot of the mid-tones too. So I'm creating some kind of different variations of the green that I'm using, and I'm starting to dab them in. I think the more different kind of hues you utilize for different areas of the painting, the kind of the more contrast you have, and the more midtones you have, the more kind of detailed you're making the painting, and the more it's a technique. It's not the only one, right? But it's a way of kind of creating this texture that when you look from far away, they look kind of photographic, you know, in a sense. That's an effect I really like to use to do. So as you can see, there's some lighter parts here being picked up by the trees. And I like to mix an even lighter green and use a tinier brush. I'm just using like a detailed round brush. I'm going to mix the lighter green. I'm going to mix some yellow into that, the greens I already have mixed here. Some yellow and some white. And I'm actually going to go in and do even tinier dots. To pick out where those like highlights of those trees are.
Guys, thank you so much for staying on. We're halfway into the live demo. So if you have any questions about Sophia's process, anything about her mini workshop, this is the perfect time to drop in those questions into the chat box. And again, if you are interested to join her mini workshop, I'm going to drop in the link again for you to sign on or sign up. And let us know what you think about the demo. And we would love to hear your thoughts and your feedback. So I'm going to drop in that link as well for the survey form.
So hopefully you can see some of this really forming the shape of the trees and picking out. And then I'm going in one last time with an even lighter green. So I've mixed in more white, and I'm picking out, doing very, very small dabs with the brush to try and pick out even like the tiniest highlights. So we've really created the shape of these trees, really by just stippling the brush. Okay. So I'm actually going to move on to the sand. I'm just going to create some shadowy bits there just to give some depth to that sand that's looking a little flat. So I'm going in with, I'm mixing in some of the darker green with that sandy color that I made before. And I'm actually going in like so, a bit more earth yellow. Now I'm just going to put some shadows.
What color did you mix for the shadows again, Sophia?
Yeah, I just put in some earth yellow, some more earth yellow into the sand color we'd made down here. And then I just grabbed some of this darker green that we were using actually up here, and I just put it in as well, just to create a bit of a kind of darker sandy color, like grayish color. Because as you can see in the reference photo, there's just these kind of lines of probably where the sand is creating shadow with itself. Okay. Now I'm going to move on to the water, and we can come back and keep adding detail and building on. But I'm going to come to the water and start building that nice like highlighty effect of the glistening water. So it's another ombre deal going on here, and it's going from this like light blue, aquarish blue to white. So I'm going to actually create those colors first before I do this, and I'm making them a little bit thicker, so not as watery. So I'm putting in some white, I'm grabbing some like primary blue color, I'm grabbing a little bit of sap green, and I just keep going back and forth until I build a color that I like, that I think, okay, this looks like it. Okay, I think I'm happy with that color, that I'm just going back and forth with these 3 colors that I picked up. And then I want to have a white ready as well, that I can begin to add as well. So I'm going to grab some white and put it on the palette and have it kind of blend in a little bit with that blue color I just mixed, so I have a nice transition as well. So I'm going to start, okay, it's a little bit too white, so I'm going back in, mixing some more blue. And that's okay that I made that mark, because it's with gouache, the amazing thing is that you can actually paint over it and it will be fine. Why I like
forgiving, like what you said earlier.
Very forgiving, yeah. Okay. All right, there you go. It's a bit more greenish. So I'm moving that back and forth. I'm creating this reflection that you can see in that reference photo. That kind of comes out to here. And then with a clean brush, I'm grabbing some of the lighter, like the white. And I'm coming in and I'm making these reflections, these ripples come through. And the closer it is to you, the closer the water is, the thicker the ripples are, and then the further away they start becoming smaller. So we're gonna emulate that. So you can see these curves of these ripples here. And as they go further away, they're becoming a little thinner. Just going in with the white here. And see how far away. I'm just using the point of the brush to really make these really tiny ripples that I'm seeing far away. Just grabbing some more white, and I'm actually just adding more white. Okay. Now you can see that the sides here, they're looking quite thin. So I need to build up some more color there. So it doesn't look like this is just standing out and this is just very thin and doesn't have much body to it. I can still see the paper. So I'm going to build that out too. So I need to create that same color, but a little thicker. So I'm adding, again, green, because it's more greenish. And then some of the blue. I'm going to start putting that down as well in kind of those ripples too, because I can see ripples here. Okay. And right at the back there, I can see some highlights of kind of reflections of the trees coming down.
Yeah.
So I'm grabbing the brush and like flat, and I'm actually using it, yeah, more kind of flat than, here, I'll show you, more like this. And I'm just creating these like little reflection things like this.
Wow. That's really good.
Hopefully it's coming together and you're starting to see some of the depth in the water. I could really be here like and building on this for hours and hours, but just to go through like quickly the process, that's kind of how I'm building out these different areas. And I'm just going to make some of this darker blue again, because there's definitely some darker parts here that I want to just go over so that I can show that depth well. And I'm actually going to also go in and add some darker ripples too, so I can have some contrast. Let me just clean my brush. So I'm going to grab some of this really dark Prussian blue and start adding some of these darker ripples, because it's the contrast that's going to make it really pop.
Okay, we're almost near to the end, everybody. So if you have any other questions that you might have for Sophia, questions about her mini workshop, that this would be the perfect time to ask those questions. If you have any other questions and you would like to get in touch with us, you can send an email to hello@etralab.com. And again, we would love to hear your thoughts. So if you have a few minutes to spare, share with us your feedback through the survey form.
I'm just going in and adding some more white to really highlight some of these areas. So I think that the last thing I want to do, even though I could keep working on this water and making it stand out even more and more, I think the most important thing is to do this foreground piece down here, which is really going to then add all that depth, which is these plants. So I'm actually, and this like tall grass, I'm actually going to mix a dark color again. So I'm using some of that really dark blue and some black. And some of the colors I've already mixed on my palette, I'm just grabbing those. And I'm making a very dark color here. And I'm going to start by laying down the dark color first in these kind of strokes. I'm going to actually cover this part here. This is going to be the base of the plants. And when you layer down a darker hue, and then on top of it, you start building your plants, you're going to create a very real and deep effect.
Mm-hmm. We do have another question here, Sophia.
Yeah.
What's the pigment information for the blue that you use? I know you mentioned it's Prussian blue.
Yeah, this is from the Hemi set that I was showing you before. So I need to find out exactly, because they use different names for those paints that I don't think they are like the traditional names that maybe like Winsor and Newton use.
Yeah.
So I need to find out exactly what it could translate to others if you can't get a hold of that set of gouache color, but it's the darkest blue within that set.
Okay.
So I've laid this down, and again, this is looking like when I said the ugly stage, but now we're going to mix some nice vibrant greens and mid greens to begin to build these leaves, and really start layering on this kind of grassy effect. And again, the paint is definitely a lot thicker than the watery layer that I started with, because I don't want to disturb the paint underneath. So I'm making very decisive strokes. I'm not reworking, because that's going to really start to bother the paint underneath it.
I love the term decisive strokes.
Yeah.
Very strokes.
Yes, you have to when you're layering, because otherwise you're going to start creating kind of a mess, and everything's going to blend into itself. So I'm making these strokes like this. I'm going to blend it. I'm going to make another green. I'm adding some yellow to that green that I just made, a little bit of white. And ideally you'd want to wait until, things start drying a bit more, but it's okay. It's okay if that doesn't happen like this right now, because I'm making those strokes. I'm not going back on anything. I can really create that effect, as you can start to see, hopefully, of grass. I'm going in different directions. It's like a very leafy grass, as you can see on the reference. And you can have fun with it. You can add flowers. You can add, in the reference, there's some like tall and just keep building. But see how layering down the darker color underneath it actually starts to create this effect, like, oh, there's there's shadow and there's grass behind it that looks darker. And then I'm gonna create an even lighter green with more yellow and more white, and I'm gonna start kind of where the sun is hitting some leaves, start laying that down. And hopefully that's now creating an even more of an illusion of kind of like this green that's really up close. Because it's so much more vibrant than the other green that you can see in the rest of the painting. And I'm just mixing some more white, making it even lighter, and really picking out some highlights of the grass here. Hopefully that's really creating that illusion of kind of the highlight, the grass, right? It's really building it.
Yeah. Looks 3D to me.
What's that?
It looks 3D.
3D, right,
Yeah.
right. With layering the kind of dark color underneath that and having so much contrast, you're creating a very 3D effect. And so hopefully now with this perspective of this grass up close, the stuff behind it starts to kind of go further into the distance because of the color choices we made. So I could really be here adding detail to all of it. I could go back into the water, add some more of the whites and the highlights in the water and the darker parts too.
How long does it normally take you to finish a piece, Sophia?
Normally I would spend 2 hours on one
2 hours.
a piece like this. Yeah. If I spent 2 hours, I could probably get a lot more detail in. And kind of like if I show you the one that I made originally, I was able to add some more detail to certain things and spend more time on stuff so I could get more hues. Like with this one, I'm showing you kind of the process, but I would go in and probably work at it even more and add more detail to things for sure.
Okay. Yeah, you can see that. I'm dropping in the link again for Sophia's mini workshop. So if you are loving this demo, her process, there's so much to learn from her. So I'm going to drop that in and feel free to sign up. Max, thank you. He said, love the reflection in the water. You make that look so easy.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
And we do have a sample, right, Sophia, of what you will be painting for the mini workshop?
Yes. So we're going to apply the same principles to a piece that has here, I'll just show you here. We're actually going to be doing this one here. So we're using some of the lessons that we learned today with like the gradients, right, in that sky, and then layering on those clouds and then the detail of the foreground. So this is even more, I'd say more intricate in the sense that these flowers, how to make them look kind of 3D and stand out. But it's using the same lessons that we did with the one that we did today. Just this one is a little bit more maybe simple with regards to that. So let me just peel the tape here so we can get the full effect of. Okay.
That's really, it looks realistic.
Thank you. Yeah.
And it's kind of 1 hour or less.
Yes, it's in 1 hour, but I would love to in the mini workshop, hopefully we can spend a bit more time like building those details. I think that would be really great, but this is what we can achieve in an hour, I think. Again, and you can decide when it's finished, so you can like keep building more on your art for sure.
Thank you so much, Sophia. This has been an amazing demo, and guys, if you painted along with us, please tag us, #@yourstudio on your socials. You can tag Sophia. I dropped in her link for her Instagram. And again, if you haven't done so, please do subscribe to our channel @yourstudio. Hit the notification bell so you won't miss out any of our live demos and to keep you updated every time that we go on. And again, if you, we would love to hear from you. If you have a few minutes of your time to spare, do fill in the survey form. And thank you so much for joining this live demo. Sophia and I had an amazing time. I hope you did too. Sophia, thank you so much for sharing your process with us. I'm going to start painting gouache. I'm going to try. You made it look so easy. And I'm sure from your mini workshop, we will be learning so much about how to add more depth and colors, and also those flowers, how to make them look 3D. So we look forward seeing you, everybody, to Sophia's mini workshop. And thank you again for showing up today and spending an hour of your time with us. It's been amazing. Thank you so much. And we'll catch you again next time. Please do take care. And thanks again for joining. Thank you,
everyone.
Sophia. Thanks, everyone. Have a great